Well, we move back to the UK, and at the Echo Arena in Liverpool, we have Liam Smith and Anthony Fowler looking for bragging rights, the bragging rights of the Scousers, the bragging rights of Liverpool. Liam Smith, obviously a long-time competitor in the boxing ring, former world champion, probably in the twilight of his career, goes in against the younger Anthony Fowler, who's looking to get that big name on his record now. He's looking to step up in his opposition, and what better way to do it than to fight one of the Smith brothers in Liam? And if he scalps Liam on Saturday night, that really does put him up there, potentially to fight a world-ranked contender for Anthony Fowler. So there's a lot on the line for him, but for Liam Smith, there's also a lot on the line for him because essentially, if he was to lose to Anthony Fowler, where does he go from here? Liam Smith has to win this fight for me. It's a must-win fight for him. If he's got any aspirations of going in for another world title fight, for me, he has got to go in there and he's got to put his stamp and his authority on there, and he's got to beat Fowler convincingly, because if he doesn't, people will talk straight away about him retiring because there's nothing left for him to do in the sport. I mean, he's 33 at this point. He's probably got, a year, two maybe in boxing. His last bout was in May this year. He lost on the cards in Russia, which was an arguably the wrong decision for some people against the undefeated Magmedev Kurbanov. I watched that fight. I thought, it could have gone either way really for that one, and with it being in Russia, I think it was inevitable that Kurbanov was going to get the nod, but that doesn't take away from the performance of Liam Smith on that night, and he still looked good, and he looked good in stopping Sam Eggington in 2019, and you could see there was levels to the game. So is there still going to be levels to the game at this point, or is Anthony Fowler Johnston? Is he going to be the man that sends Smith maybe onto the shelf or into retirement, and is he the man that's going to move on in the division? And if he wins this fight, arguably, can people say he's the best super welterweight in Britain?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? You got Anthony Fowler, who's still really relatively early in his career, but still aged 30. He had a good amateur background, didn't he? And it took him a while to sort of make the turnover into the pro rank. So he was pretty much fast tracked, and that got stopped quite quickly when he lost to Fitzy. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what we get from Liam Smith. I always see Liam Smith as the guy that's head and shoulders at one point above all those sort of coming through. And I think the gap has closed. I think it's just a matter of, has that gap closed far enough for Anthony Fowler on Saturday night? I'm not so sure. I like Anthony. I do enjoy watching him fight, but I think there are moments within his performances where I think he looks vulnerable. And I think Liam Smith's been around the block long enough. He's only 3 years older. He's got way more experience in the professional game than Anthony Fowler. And I just think he shows that dominance. I don't think he's on that much of a decline. I'm not going to say he isn't. 33 years of age, having the amount of fights he's had, there's obviously going to be wear and tear there. But and the Kurbanov fight, with it being in Russia, I think Kurbanov did deserve the fight. I think he actually showed us that he's a name to look out for, that Russian, to be fair. But going to Russia, I think Liam Smith just shows you that, he don't play around still. He will still take himself out of his comfort zone, and he's still able to put performance on. I don't think there is anyone domestically that is better than him. Honest to God, I really don't. I don't think they're quite there yet. Even still, I think maybe another year for Anthony Fowler. I think he's gone in a bit too soon. And I think Liam Smith, I think he wins the fight, Sean. I've just got this feeling that Anthony's just not going to be good enough. Saying that, I mean, he could produce a great performance. Who knows? I think Liam's just too tough. And I think that's why for me, he wins the fight.
You say it could be too soon for him, but he's 16 fights in now. Do you know, at what point is it too soon for a fighter to go in?
What I mean is, as in the level that Liam brings. Fight a Cheeseman. That's what I'm saying. I know he's fought Eggert and he's fought Fitzy, but even look at Sergio Garcia, the European champion. Someone like that, rather than a Liam Smith. I think Liam Smith's too early for him. I think Liam Smith isn't quite on the decline as much. That's what I mean by that.
Get you. No, I understand that, and maybe I'm doing Smith a bit of a disservice. It's not so much that I don't think he can beat Anthony Fowler, because I think he's got the technical and boxing ability to make it easy for himself. But then is Anthony Fowler, I think he's a much bigger guy, and if he steps his foot down and he stamps his authority on the fight and he tries to bully Smith, I think that's when we'll get a really, really good fight. I honestly think it'll be a very good fight. If I'm being honest with you, I don't think it will be a one-sided fight. I think it will be very much like the Kurbanov fight. I think it will be very much a close quarters affair, unless Fowler can keep him on the end of a jab. Fowler's got a really good jab. He has developed into a really good fighter from that loss to Scott Fitzgerald, but it's whether he has enough at this stage, is what you're saying, as to whether he can beat Liam Smith. Only time's going to tell on Saturday night how this is going to go down. I'm struggling to make a prediction, because part of me feels like it's a passing of the guard. Part of me feels like Anthony Fowler will go in there and put a career best performance on, and show us that he's ready to step up a bit. But then Liam Smith's still got enough in him to beat an Anthony Fowler. So it is. I'm really struggling to make a prediction as to how this fight is going to go. And maybe I'll bring one before the end of the episode, and I've had a little think about it as we're going through the course of it. But it's not the only super welterweight fight on this card. There's actually two others, two absolutely brilliant super welterweight fights on this card. Ted Cheeseman, 17-2-1. Troy Williamson, 16-0-1 for the British super welterweight title. Troy Williamson has been a fighter I've watched throughout his career, and I've seen him rise, and I've said to myself and many people around me that, this guy needs a shot at a bigger name, and when he gets that shot at a bigger name, he's going to really give him a good fight. What better opponent to have than Ted Cheeseman, who is willing to go toe-to-toe with pretty much anyone he gets in the ring with? This is really going to be a battle for me of who can tough it out all the way through the fight. And obviously Ted Cheeseman's already proven he can do that on many occasions. It's now whether Troy Williamson has got it in him to grind out a victory over Ted Cheeseman. That's what it'll boil down to. How much we know what Ted Cheeseman got, we know his limitations and capabilities, but we've not seen Troy Williamson's yet, and this is the chance for us to see it and to see whether he is the real deal and whether he can stamp his authority in the super welterweight division. That for me is the fight on that card that I think might outshine, barring maybe the main event, that'll probably outshine the rest of the card.
I'm in complete agreement with you. I think Ted Cheeseman, you know what you're going to get with Ted, and he's going to come in and, for me, Ted can box. He can box a bit, but he's now got this reputation that's followed him where he just gets hit way too many times. If he could just adjust himself sometimes and not just exchange as often as he does, I think he could win fights a lot easier. He might actually, there's a few fights where he lost very close fights, and maybe, he could have maybe edged them. I'm talking about the Fitzgerald fight there, but, the Sergio Garcia fight he was completely outclassed. It's probably the only time, really, I'll have to say that he was completely outclassed. Troy Williamson, you just don't know what you're getting. That's the beauty of this fight. You know what he's bringing. He hasn't been beaten, and it is going to be a matter of who buckles under the pressure. Experience always tells for me. I think experience and the youth is on Cheeseman's side, so I'm edging towards Cheeseman, but I would not be surprised if Troy comes and gets a victory. I really wouldn't. It's going to be a great scrap and a potential fight of the year. Again, Ted Cheeseman will be another nominee for it. I'm almost certain of it.
We've got another good super welterweight fight, as I mentioned there. We've got Kieran Conway and James Metcalf. Kieran Conway, as we know, was coming off the back of a loss to Sissoko earlier on this year. And then we've got James Metcalf, who obviously is coming off the back of a loss to Ted Cheeseman. So we've got two fighters here that are vying for getting another big fight in the super welterweight division, and they've got to go for each other to do it, which I think it's good that this fight's been made, because obviously we now get to see who will step forward in that super welterweight division again domestically, and who will move forward to face one of these guys up in the top end of this division. James Metcalf obviously faced Ted Cheeseman and was on the back end of a TKO loss. So, has he got enough in the tank to beat a very experienced now Kieran Conway, who's picked up so much experience over his past few fights? I think you look at the fights that he has been involved in over the past couple of years, and you also got to remember that Kieran Conway actually fought Ted Cheeseman and obviously went to a split decision draw, which was a really good fight back in 2019, and since then he's had some really good victories, barring the split decision loss earlier this year. He's done really well. He's really come leaps and bounds, and I think this makes for a really interesting fight as well. And I feel like it's one where the loser kind of what else? What else is there for them to do other than maybe look at a potential to can they move up a weight or can they move back down a weight? That's all that I see left for the loser in this fight. Personally, that's what I see. Other people will say differently, of course. Everyone has their own opinion. But it's another good super welterweight fight. It really makes the card start to become quite a decent card. And then you've got the bantamweight, Shannon Courtenay, the WBA World Female Bantamweight Champion, facing off against Jamie Mitchell 6-0-2. She's back in the ring. She was supposed to fight a little bit earlier on in the year, and now she's got the opportunity to defend that WBA title. And we'll get to see her, if she's improved from her last fight. We'll get to see has she got the potential to go on and have some great fights in the future. I think it's difficult to say, really, because the opponent she's fighting, I've not really seen a lot of. I'm going to be totally honest with everybody. There's no point of me trying to sort of say, this is a great opponent, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to try and sell it to you like Eddie Hearn would. At the end of the day, she's fighting an opponent who's fought 8 times, won 6, drew 2 of them, and fought people that have either had debuts or losing records. So, to me, that sort of screams that this person really shouldn't be fighting for a world title at this point in time, and it also screams to me that this is being lined up for Shannon Courtenay to probably look good on the night. So we'll get to see it, of course. You just never know, though, because the depth of the female division is not great. So you don't know if any of these girls are actually really, really good fighters until they step up, and we might see that. But I expect Shannon Courtenay to win. I expect her to look good, and I expect her to march on to another big domestic fight, or not so much domestic, but a world title fight with a domestic opponent.
Yeah, and that Jamie Mitchell, I mean, her nickname's the Miracle, and I think that's quite fitting because I think she's going to need one if she's going to get past Shannon. To be honest with you, I think Shannon does win the fight. I think it is being set up for her to just get a few rounds in. I think that's what it is after the Ebony Bridges fight. So I can't see her losing the fight. Just jumping back though to the Metcalf fight and the Conway fight. That's a fight I really am looking forward to because I think Conway's just a little bit further ahead than Metcalf for me. There isn't much between them, but this fight is literally whoever wins this can then look at, again, the Fitzies, the Cheesemans and the Fowlers and the Smiths because they're sort of like just a little bit ahead of those guys. And then after that, as you say, whether they move up or down in weight, tends to be up in weight. But yeah, that's a good fight. That's a really good card as well, I have to say. And I'll be tuning in, watching all of these before the Fury fight over in America. So we've got a load of good fights to go through, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a nice Saturday night of boxing.
It is, and also on the card, Natasha Jonas is back in action after her loss earlier this year to Katie Taylor. And then we've also got the debut of the Olympian Peter McGrail on this card, which is Peter, one we've been looking forward to seeing Peter turn pro. Everybody's been waiting for Peter to turn pro for quite a long time, and he obviously competed in the recent Olympics and was knocked out in the first round, surprisingly, to everybody's shock horror. But he's now turning pro. He's doing it in the right place in Liverpool. He's doing it on a good card. And this is the opportunity to see if he is going to transition over to the pro pretty well. At the moment, I've not got an opponent down, as BoxRec has it, as TBA to be announced. So you can imagine it is going to be somebody that's going to come in with a losing record. It's just going to make Peter McGrail look good. It's going to be difficult to really sort of see at this point how good he's going to be as a pro, because for his next few fights, it is really going to be all about getting that experience as a professional and transitioning over from the amateur style to the professional style. So I don't really want to say too much at this stage because I haven't really got an expectation of seeing how good he is until maybe 10 fights in at least. So I'm not really going to make a comment on it, Johnston. I think it's only right to kind of tuck that one away just for the time being, just to sort of see how he gets on first. But I did want it to bring to the attention of everybody listening because, of course, if you know the Olympic boxing that's happened recently, you're a UK listener, you'll know all about Peter McGrail and his journey through the amateur scene and all the accolades that he has won throughout his career. So all in all, it's actually a pretty decent card, and I'm quite looking forward to this one. But there's a lot of fights on Saturday. And even Frank Warren, as I said at the top of the show, Frank Warren's also got a card on. So there's a Frank Warren show, there's an Eddie Hearn show, then you've got the Top Rank show. We're actually really, really stacked this weekend. The Frank Warren show is headlined by Brad Foster and Jason Cunningham. The EBU, the Commonwealth, the British super bantamweight titles all on the line. Brad Foster just looks head and shoulders above the rest at super bantamweight on this show. I'm looking forward to seeing the fight against Jason Cunningham, because Jason Cunningham's a really, really good opponent and a really good test for Brad Foster to sort of look at what he's going to do next. Jason Cunningham, you look at the guys he's been in with, and you look at the opponents he's been in with. He's been in with some great opponents. You look at the guys like Reece Bellotti, Jordan Gill, Michael Conlon. He lost to Michael Conlon in 2018, but he's been on a good spell recently. His last fight was against Gamal Yafai, who was 18-1, and he beat Gamal Yafai, and that's what's landed him this opportunity at Brad Foster, who to me looks like an absolute talent and looks like he needs to really be moved forward now to world ranked contenders, world ranked fighters to move his career on. He's beaten the likes of Lucian Reed. He's got the win over James Beach Jr. and in his last fight, it was a bit of a layup, I'll be honest. It was Alvaro Rodriguez, and he beat him by decision. But he looks like a guy who is definitely going to be fighting for a world title in the next 18 months if he continues this trend.
Yeah, I think you're right. He come through, he had that Lucian Reed, the draw, didn't he? The majority draw, and then he went back straight into a rematch and got the victory, retired in the end, Lucian Reed. It was a good performance, I felt, from Brad Foster. And I think the good thing for Brad is that he is fighting a guy in Cunningham who's been the rounds. He knows what it's about. He's been in he's had some good performances recently. He's a southpaw. I think that's another thing. I think that's a great thing for Brad to have, to fight a southpaw. It always gives you a different dimension of how it's going to work. Gamal Yafai struggled with it badly. He was all over the shot, and he allowed Cunningham to just put the pressure on him, and that was a career best performance from Jason. And he's on a high. Who knows? He could go in and derail Brad Foster as he did with your fight. It's a strong possibility. He's on a good running streak, and as you say, the fact that he went in with Michael Conlon and he got done by a better fighter, a technically better fighter in Michael Conlon, and I'm sort of in my head, I'm thinking that that's probably going to be the same type of performance we see from Brad Foster. I think that's what I'm expecting. But if he can produce the goods like he did against Gamal Yafai, then he's got his work cut out, Brad. I'm expecting Brad to come through, but it's a good fight. It's a decent fight. It's I'm not going to knock Frank Warren at all, because comparing with what's going on at the moment. I'm not going to knock it so much. There's a few other names on his card as well, which we'll run through in a minute.
Yeah, I'm going to say Echo Asuman's one I'm really looking forward to. I've been watching Echo for quite some time. I think, in fact, when I first started getting involved in boxing media, Echo was just starting out his career, and he's gone on and he's actually had some really, really good victories. He's got past the journeyman stage, and now he's gone on and he's beat the likes of Chris Jenkins. He beat Cedric Paynard, who had that life and death fight with Conor Benn a few years ago, and now he's facing a fellow undefeated fighter, and he's defending his Commonwealth and British welterweight championships against Danny Ball, who's 10-0-1, and Danny Ball in his last fight had a great win. He beat another undefeated prospect in Sam Gilley, and that's really put him into great contention really for this bout. And he also beat Mason Cartwright as well, which I thought was a really, really good win for him. He got a draw against Casey Benjamin back in 2019, but he is at the point of his career where he's got a great opportunity, and it is a case of whoever wins this fight really will march on even further. And I think for me, Echo Asuman does win it. I think he's an absolutely talented fighter. I think, and even at the age of 32, I think he's gonna be up there, and he's gonna be in some great fights in the welterweight division. I can see him fighting the likes of Conor Benn, to be honest, or a Florian Marku in the future. I can see these two sort of guys potentially getting it on down the line, because these are the types of fights that I think Echo Asuman will need to move his career forward. But I'm not counting Danny Ball out of this one. I think he's obviously got something to show in this fight, but I think for me, Echo Asuman all day wins that fight, and I think that's where he moves on, and we get to see how good he could potentially be in the future.
Yeah, and I think when you do look at his CV and you see a name like Tyrone Nurse on there, that's always a tough fight, Tyrone. I've watched Tyrone for several years, and I know by then, he had been through the wars a little bit at times, but it was a tough competitor. So that was a good victory. Looking at that, and then obviously the Paynard, and who is a right pain in many people's asses, even though his record don't suggest it, and Chris Jenkins. For me, you just look at those wins, and I think that is what gives him the edge over Danny Ball. But as you say, you can't, he's 10-0, he's still young. And if he produces a good performance on the night, then he could cause him problems. It's going to be a close one. And I must say, Frank Warren, he's put on a few close fights here. You can't knock it. And it's good to see old Callum Johnston on the card as well. It'd be interesting to see how he gets on.
He needs this fight. He needs it because of the inactivity aspects of it. He'd not fought since 2019 before he got in the ring earlier this year and got a TKO victory at York Hall. He's keeping busy. Yeah, okay, it's against an opponent not many people will have heard of, but he needs to keep busy. He needs big fights. He needs to be propelling himself up there. And I really hope he does get a victory, and I hope he propels himself into these big fights with the likes of Lyndon Arthur and Anthony Yard, which are probably easier fights to make for Frank Warren, given that he's got both of these fighters under his banner. So I'm hoping that this fight leads to the winner of the Yard and Arthur rematch when that happens. So I'm hoping that kind of that's where his career goes, and we get to see who really is the best of the rest in terms of the light heavyweights in the division. Obviously, we've got guys like Callum Smith who've moved up. We've got Joshua Barazzi who are at different stages of the career. But the best of the rest is Yard, Arthur and Johnson for me. I think they're the guys that are just sort of fringe pushing to world title contention. So for Callum Johnson to get a win puts him in line really to fight the winner of Arthur and Yard and their second fight. I just wanted to bring to the attention of the listeners a certain fighter that I've been watching from the start of his career, and already he's 13-0, and it's Nick Ball. He's been fighting as long as I've been involved in the boxing media, which is about 4 or 5 years now, and I've watched him progress throughout the super featherweight division, and I've watched him be involved in some decent fights, and he's been in there, and he's fought 2 undefeated fighters in Jerome Campbell and Brian Phillips throughout his career already, and he's got victories, and he's looked good doing them, and I think he's got an opportunity to show people yet again on Saturday that he needs to be pushed forward. He's fighting a guy in Peter Goodell who's 10-6. So straight away, that will scream volumes that this is going to be an activity fight for him, a fight to just keep pushing him forward. But I think he does need to be moved forward. I think he needs to be pushed on throughout his career. And I think if you look at the opponents that are around him in the super featherweight division, I think there's a lot of guys there that I think he needs to be starting to push towards. I think there's a lot of fighters I think that needs to be steered towards in that particular division. So he's one name that I think people, if you don't have the opportunity to watch him, please do go and do it afterwards. If you've not seen him fight before, you've not seen anything about him, please go and check him out. He's a really, really good fighter, and I think he will be a name at the top of these cards in the not too distant future. You've got a few smaller fights on the card: Owen Cooper, George David, Amar Akbar, Macaulay Owen, and Ryan Woolridge, all fighting on this card as well. So all in all, this weekend it's so stacked. It's probably the most stacked weekend we've had since boxing has returned full time. I think this is what's good about this weekend, is that we've got so many cards on, and I've got to give a big shout out to all the other cards. There's loads of other cards in the UK. We've got cards in the Crown Plaza in Glasgow. We've got fights on there. We've got fights in Nottingham. We've got fights even in the York Hall Bethnal Green, the Steve Goodwin show, a good fight on there. Liam Dillon, Dennis Waholmes happening this weekend. We've got fights up here in the Northwest. It's really stacked in terms of the domestic scene this weekend and the world scene, and I'm genuinely really looking forward to this weekend. I think this weekend's probably going to really reignite my love of the sport, in the sense that I've been quite, and I've said this before to you, Johnston, I've said it I think on a couple of episodes previously, that I've kind of struggled to get up for a lot of these cards recently because a lot of them have been overmatched, or they've just not been the sort of marquee fights that I've been looking forward to seeing, and I'm really excited for this weekend because I've got about three to five fights that genuinely excite me, and genuinely I can't wait to sit down and watch.
I'm with you. It's sort of it got the old blood rushing after the Joshua fight. I got into that fight. I thought it was brilliant. I still think he can get better, but I mean that's for another show. That got my mouth watering, I suppose. And now we had the weekend off, and we knew this is coming up. And then you got the good card. The best card for me over here is the Liverpool card. But then like, as you say, mentioning all those smaller hall shows, which is great to see them back. It's great to have so many. It means that we are moving in the right direction as a country as well, and we're starting to get these nights out again, which we all miss. So, I just want to say to all those that actually go into these fights, good luck. I hope you enjoy it, because I will be watching at home. Really disappointed that I can't be there. witnessing it myself at ringside. But some great cards, man. The big one, the main event, is definitely the one to look out for. But then, as you say, there's about 4 or 5 fights there that really have got me intrigued, and I'm really interested and fascinated to find out how they all pan out. And what happens really that when the heavyweights are around. Now, it's a heavyweight weekend. It's a heavyweight weekend in terms of fighting and boxing in this country, and it's a heavyweight weekend in general for the heavyweights. So I love it. It does want you to. It makes me want to get up and watch this fight because of the other fights that are on there, and it's nice to feel that again. I haven't felt that in a little while, so I'm with you, Sean. It's hopefully it doesn't disappoint.
I don't think it will. I'm genuinely.
I don't think it. I'm thinking the judges and the, and the referees. I hope they don't piss us off too much. I'm sure the fighters will perform.
Yeah, I think we'll see a really good weekend of action. I really do. I'm genuinely looking forward to it, guys. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you've got your DVRs set to record some of these shows, because it's going to be quite impossible to watch the Liverpool show and the Frank Warren London show, or the Birmingham show, sorry, this weekend. And then you've obviously got Tyson Fury in the early hours of the morning for us in the UK. So it's an absolute fest of fights this weekend, and I'm genuinely excited, and I hope you guys are too.